All right, everybody. Hopefully, our audio issues are fixed, and I'm even going to move the microphone just a little bit closer, so hopefully that there are no problems. Yeah, I understand that. I saw, believe it or not, I saw the comments. I didn't need it like repeated multiple times or anything or reaffirmed so much. But yeah, I know that there were audio issues, and it just so happened that it happened after Golden Week. And also after the filming of Intervisions, which, by the way, thank you for anyone who's been saying super nice things about Intervisions. It was a lot of fun, and I hope to do it again. But the timing was really bad on the audio issues, just because I could not really do anything. I was on vacation, and I wasn't entirely sure what the issue was, and some videos were already recorded, and that kind of made me feel bad because I couldn't get those videos up. And all of this is segueing into the Barret review. So, yeah, Barret. All right. So let's redo this review that I've probably done 2-3 times now. Yeah, Barret is a character that shows a lot of personality, especially over some of the other characters in this game. Sometimes you get a lot of characters with reused animations on the main intro screen, so it's kind of nice to see some brand new animations. Aerith and Tifa, I will say, have some really nice main screen animations. Cloud is by far the most boring of the units, and Barret, I think, actually has the most personality of them all. So shoutouts to Barret for that reason, if no other reason. But we are here to talk about him, and Barret, to me, is one of the most undertuned characters I think I've ever seen. Like, he reminds me a lot, getting into this review, of Cecil, and I don't necessarily mean that in an incredibly negative way, but I do think that a lot of what, looking at Barret's stats overall, like here is my copy of Barret. Just going to show you this, like even right now with a speed buff, he's essentially at 72 speed, which feels pretty slow, like 3,500 HP, which is a good amount of HP for the build that I'm currently looking at with him. But if you look at Aerith for comparison, she's like a 79, and as we get into like other units, just to compare, 86, 83, and just for shoutouts, 92. Like, I think that there is something to be said that if you are going to be running Barret, I think you're going to want to be getting as many things to boost his speed as possible. But given the fact that we now know about the Laswell vision card, a ice vision card with human killer, speed boost, and attack boost on it, I'm not entirely sure that undertuning Barret was a bad idea. Just because if he was any stronger or any faster, he might actually end up being one of the strongest characters in the game. Especially if Lord Mont did not exist. This guy is looking to be a much scarier character than I, probably have estimated. So I'm going a little conservative on my estimates until I see him in like more action, especially with this new vision card coming out. That's going to be a big curiosity about him. But anyway, this is the friend version of him. As you can see, he can reach a good amount of HP, a pretty nice amount of attack for a gunner. Speed in this case is about 81 when fully maxed out. And yeah, overall, I think that in general, I would say that Barret is probably going to be, like I said, I compared him with Cecil because he does feel a little bit slow. He does feel like not quite as powerful as I thought he would end up being, but there are a lot of globalers out there who really like Cecil, and I'm sure they would probably be screaming in the YouTube comments if I didn't mention that. And I do think that Cecil has probably aged maybe a little bit better on the global side than I think on the JP side, but that does speak merits, and I don't think that Barret should be underestimated. Looking at his what he's good against sword-based units. He's actually, neutral against spears, which is pretty nice. Strike is a little bit of a weakness, but he's also good against other gunners too, and I think that is a strong case for him being good in particularly against PvP. I don't think that this guy is ever going to be a good farmer because most of his attacks are single attacks, but I do think in PvP and especially sometimes high difficulty content, he will be a force to be reckoned. Alright, so We're gonna go through this unit more in a with a fine-tooth comb, and again, probably wrap this up with talking about that vision card because it is a scary vision card to be sure. But looking at his TMR, a big amount of HP, defense, and critical evasion, which is an interesting part of Barret. If you look at his TMR ability, critical rate for himself gets increased by 30 for 3 turns, while critical evasion gets increased by 30 for 3. Makes him harder to hit, but him easier to critical against other enemies, and that's pretty darn strong considering that his master ability does have defense penetration. Means that you could get a good amount of defense penetration already, but you also have a pretty high chance of getting critical, and that works well with Cloud since Cloud can, generate AP faster. But I do think that Barret will probably, if you're not running this, you're, obviously running Bells. Let's face it, it's a Bells world, and we all just heed the toll of the Bells. Hey, alright, that was kind of meant to be a little bit of a segue, and I tripped over my words. Let's get into Barret as a build option, because this is where I think also things need to really be considered, but how you are building this guy. So take a look. We have 3 jobs: FF7R Gunner, Regular Gunner, and last but not least, Fighter. In support, basically his two supports from his main job give him extra defense and critical evasion, as well as the second one giving him a chance to being targeted. And early impressions of his kit have not changed too terribly much. Although I do think that the idea of him being a tank is pretty much out the window. Sure, he can generate some hate, and that will be maybe potentially good for drawing some fire. I mean, he's tankier than other characters. But him as a tank is just another one of the Cecil ideas where people are like, he can be a tank, and he just doesn't have the, other avenues of hate generation. He doesn't really support enough stats to being a complete tank, and I'm not entirely sure that you want him. But that doesn't necessarily mean bad things, because the other way to build his kit is with the Regular Gunner, which gives him an increased range by 2 for a decrease of evasion, as well as an increase to his missile attacks, which is pretty darn strong. And then Fighter gives him, increased accuracy while upgrading one of his Fighter counter ability, or increase HP and attack. How you want to build this guy is up to you. Given the lower speed, I think it's probably good to go with the range on his builds. I would say that hate generation you throw out, and then it's kind of a toss-up between the Fighter, HP up, and attack up if you want someone, generally stronger, or if you just want missile damage because the enemy is not very missile resistant, you probably want the Gunner one. But I definitely don't see him running either of his 2 main supports. No, that's just kind of okay. Taking a look at counters really fast, there isn't really too much to talk about. He does have the Gunner counter, which, offers him potentially more counters against maybe Frederica or something the like. His Fighter one I don't think is really good unless you're just against other physical units, and I don't think it's worth running. But his main counter, it probably is. It's essentially the same thing with a slightly modified range as the Regular Gunner counter, except it does have a decreased agility by 20% for 3 turns to whoever gets hit by this. And I think that's actually probably good enough to be run. I'm not saying bad things about the other Gunner one, but I think that this, with the agility down, and given that Barret can be a much closer range gunner because his FF7R Gunner job has just closer to him, like short of being directly around this guy, he really doesn't have much of a dead zone unlike other, ranged characters. And I think that is powerful, seeing that, he does have a defensive stat and he can just end up in a brawl and end up being a. All right. Looking at his jobs, let's talk about Fighter really quickly. He has the increase max HP, restore HP, and increase defense, which is a good defensive ability to be sure. It's also a TP ability, so that's fine. He has the attack and decrease attack for 3 turns. He can also increase the effect by receiving damage. That is the Fighter ability. He has the attack and move to a target panel, which is kind of an interesting idea if it works with the range increase. I don't think I've ever tried that before, but I'm interested in it. Now, restore HP by 30% for self, and last but not least, increase strike attack and defense penetration. For the most part, I think you'd be running a very narrow sect of abilities that if you are running fighter / pugilist. It's just most of these abilities don't synergize with his gunner abilities, and I don't think you necessarily want to run him because his main job already has enough debuffs. It is kind of interesting running this job for the heal abilities and making him more tanky if he's going to get into brawl fights, but I don't think that this is necessarily well to be run, and it probably just provides stats and from other facets that are good enough that it's not necessarily needed. All right. Taking a look at regular gunner, he does have increased missile attack and range for himself and allies, which is a good buff. The blind causing damage ability, the immobilized damaging ability, he can increase his critical rate for himself and allies. The beast killer with the piercing damage on it, and last but not least, the 200% modifier, 25% chance to stable. This, I mean, all of these abilities have good range on it, and this is the sub job I recommend. Regular gunner has some of the things that I think he is missing. By increasing his missile attack for multiple turns, he can just better leverage that than his one turn increase by more, but it's only 60 as opposed to 38 for a missile attack increase. Also giving him a higher critical rate, and other allies synergizes well with Cloud. It synergizes well with that ability. So I think that overall Barret is pretty good to, like, you're just running Gunner all the time as his sub job. Taking a look at his main job, the sub part of it basically has a around him like full counter. I'll see if I can't find it. It's one. Yeah, as you can see, hits everything around him, which is a good ability to have. It also ignores float, meaning that it could hit someone like Gilgamesh, and it has a 25% chance to inflict mobilize. All of these things are really good. His other ability that he has is a single turn increase of missile attack by 60, but I don't think that's generally good enough. I think I'd rather run the multiple turn bonus that could also benefit other units. And Cloud does have an increase, or does have missile attack abilities, so it is considerably running that Barret and Cloud will be pretty good friends for them. Now into the main part of the job, he has one of his abilities decreases attack by 40% and does extra damage. He can increase his own defense, which is probably just a good AP generator. It should be noted that getting to 120, that will also increase his attack by 40, and it will increase the defense he gets a little bit more. So 40% for attack increase and defense increase by 20, both for 3 turns, which is generally really strong, I think. Just running all of these self buffs that he has damaging abilities. He has one with a increased critical chance that also decreases healing power. Has a 200% modifier, which is not any kind of a slouch of an ability. He has decreased defense by 30 for 3 turns to target, and 165 modifier. That also gets upgraded to have a chance to inflict slow. Again, slow is a good thing, and I do think I mentioned that on the Rain, and if not, I'll retroactively admit that I do think slow is a good, generally nice status effect over some of the other ones. And I think it benefits Barret. He can potentially get further away from his enemies. So yeah, getting him into his 120 seems like a good value. And his last one is his full EX ability, which is pretty darn nice. We'll take a look at that, and hopefully those sirens are not coming through too loud. But this one is why I'm perfectly fine with throwing out his, his main job sub part, because this is just pretty strong. You get 3 uses of this, 26 AP, which is not exceedingly high amount of AP. It is a 205% modifier, and it just counters guts. Very strong ability, I think. And it also solves the problem that a lot of gunners have, is that if the enemy gets too close, what are you supposed to do? Guy can still, not only has a good defense stat, but really strong. Last but not least, his limit burst is a 200% modifier and has a 67% chance to inflict confusion, and it is a multi-hit ability, so it is dealing a fair amount of damage. Overall, I would say that Barret is a pretty darn strong character. I think that he is recommendable pretty highly by me. I think that as a range character, like, he has a way to increase his range, which kind of negates a little bit of his slow speed. And at last but not least, I mean, the new vision card that will be available is just very, very strong. If I can't bring it up. Well, there's a 1.5 anniversary. Here to talk about that. This vision card. The Laswell Ice Vision card is, I think, a pretty big game changer for the ice element. And if you are a Laswell Orin person, this card is probably essential, but I do think that this is why Barret's stats, when we first saw them, were pretty unimpressive, because this gives a party-wide agility up, AP acquisition up, human killer for the entire party, and last but not least, a single target gets higher amount of attack as well. This vision card is straight insane if you are a ice element person, and I do think it goes an incredibly long way, making Barret an essential member of a ice party team that can really leverage this vision card. And it's not a limited vision card either. So yeah, Barret, I think, is one of those characters that is probably being not looked at as seriously by the community, much to the detriment. Like, I think I'm going to make an overall view of all of the FF7 characters that I have in a little bit, just re-reviewing Cloud and Tifa as well as Aerith compared to, now that I've had a little more time with all of the characters. But long story short is that I think that Barret is one of the characters that is probably the least excited about, but I do think he is probably going to be a very strong performer. Yeah, Ice Element, good get for them, I gotta say. So let me know what you think of Mr. Barret in the comments section. But overall, my opinion of him is definitely strong, and I hope the audio issues are done permanently from now on. Thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time.